Good morning, ma'am.
Hi, Dina. Hi again.
Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you. How about now? Yeah.
I can hear you now.
Right. So Q&A is there. The chat function is also there. Gopal, if you could make me the host.
Ma'am, I can see both the name and the name of Dina Banerjee. Both your name is also coming. Kirti ma'am, your name is coming in Dina Banerjee. Can you rename yourself?
Maybe because I used the link that she said, okay, let me try and leave and I'll join with the link that I was sent.
Okay.
Recording. Okay, so it's being recorded, everyone. Do you want to go live on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube? That option is there as well.
Not today.
Not today, not feeling like it.
Not today.
Should we have 6 attendees. Should we wait for a couple of minutes?
And 4 of them are us.
No, I think no. We are panelists, so the attendees is 6 other people.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Let's just, given that it's a Sunday, we'll wait. Pulkit, I forgot to ask you, where are you based?
Currently, I'm the job location is Bombay and my home in Varanasi.
Ah,
Where?
Varanasi.
Okay.
Varanasi.
Well, it is going to be a challenge if I can't hear Pulkit.
I need to switch off my video. Is it better?
Yes,
It's much better,
Thank you.
yeah.
Let me change my internet.
So good morning to all the participants.
I think it's already 11:02. So,
Okay, do you want to start? We have around 13 participants.
I'm not able to hear you, Kirti, Prof. Kirti.
How about now? Can you hear me? Dina, are you able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, Pulkit, are you able to hear me now? I think we might have lost him.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Clear?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So should we start? It's already 11:03.
Yeah.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being part of this webinar session. The responsibility to the responding to unpredictability with resilient leadership. So just setting up the whole idea. Leaders are the one who provide the guidance and clarity by setting up the vision and strategy to achieve the same. The most sought after role of a leader to successfully navigating through his or her team from a difficult situation. Today, in this pandemic situation, the role of a corporate leader has become much more crucial as there is an unpredictability all around. Hence, we are going to decode the buzz, how the resilient leaders are responding to the unpredictability. For our viewers, whenever any questions comes into their mind, they can write on their QA box, which is mentioned in the mid of the section. And at the end of the discussion, we'll try to answer as much as possible all these questions. So my name is Pulkit. I'm a moderator of this discussion. By profession, I am a senior manager in one of the leading edtech companies, Whitehead Junior, a proud alumnus of IIM Udaipur and NIT Nagpur. I do have roughly 6 years of experience across the real estate, hardcore engineering, project management, finance, and education industry. Today, we have two prominent prof of IIM Udaipur with us, Prof. Kirti and Prof. Deena. Prof. Kirti is an assistant professor in organization behavior and human resources management area. She graduated with a PhD from Monash University, Australia, and early career research who has previously held appointments at IIM Lucknow, University of Monash, Swinburne, and Queensland. Her area of research primarily focus on corporate sustainability, organization response to the climate change, and strategizing for grand challenges. She has recently published her work on climate change in actioning using the concept of resilience and adaptive cycles. She is currently working with Vedanta to understand the role of stakeholder relationship and deliberative democracy in delivering CSR outcomes. As a self-proclaimed, she proclaimed herself as a Potterhead, and she looks up as a Prof. Dumbledore as her role model. So now coming to Prof. Deena. Prof. Deena is an assistant professor at the Organization Behavior and Human Resource Management area in IIM Udaipur. She earned her PhD from Purdue University, USA. Before starting her career at IIMU, she also held academic positions in Calcutta University, Purdue University, and Shippensburg University. Her primary area of research and interest includes gender, labor market, career, and leadership. She is widely published in various social science and organization behavior journals. At the intersection of gender and leadership, she is especially interested in the phenomena of socialization and eventually drew her attention to the reconceptualization of leadership from a micro perspective. Lately, she takes a lot of interest in this redefinition of leadership. And indeed, it is a both agentic and empowering in nature. She is currently working with a women leader in India who hold 2 leadership positions. She is studying how social relations change when one assesses the reality from the perspective of these women. Coffee and chocolates are the 2 major sources of her sustenance. So if somebody wants to catch up with dinner, the coffee and chocolates will be the right thing. So now coming towards our topic, in today's unpredictable landscape, leader faces new challenges, difficult decisions, and changing circumstances. To successfully navigate through the times of uncertainty and lead your team to the success, you need to be adaptable, proactive, and perhaps most importantly, resilient. So, Prof, can you shed some light on and provide us a better clarity on this for the viewers? Can we start with Prof. Kirti on this?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pulkit, and thank you to everyone for joining us on a Sunday morning. So let me begin by introducing you to a couple of my very good friends. It's a one-sided friendship though, right now. We don't know what the future holds. So everyone meet Donald Trump and Jacinda Ardern, global leaders, right now having to navigate unpredictability, uncertainty, which has been created due to the ongoing pandemic. Now, one of them is being heralded as a great example of leadership. In fact, their response is being termed as a masterclass in leadership. The other, not so much, mostly being criticized for their response. And therefore, it's really not surprised that one country, it saw 104 days of no new infections. And this Monday, they relaxed most of their lockdown restrictions, whereas the other recorded 200,000 deaths on Monday, which was the highest for a country. There's no prizes here for guessing who's who. I think we all follow politics enough to know the answer to this. So the thing is, this pandemic, if anything, it has again brought us back to the concept of leadership. What is the role of leadership when we are facing unpredictability, uncertainty, and crisis? How an organization will respond, how a country will respond, how it will recover from unpredictability, and how it's going to sort of, thrive in a new normal. Most of this is going to be driven by leadership. It could be at the individual level or at the level of the organization. What we need to understand, or what we want to discuss in this webinar today, is that when dealing with uncertainty, there is not going to be a defined response plan. There's not going to be a template, because we are looking at new things, we are looking at new crises. These so-called black events is what we are trying to respond to and manage. What we need instead is, we need some behaviors, we need mindsets, which help us to understand what is happening right now, what is happening yesterday, not be overwhelmed, and looking ahead, make sure that we are ready for that new normal that is going to be around us. Now, research and practice has already, it's established that your traditional top-down, autocratic, command control, more dominant, aggressive styles of leadership do not work in these situations. They do not help us when we are trying to navigate uncertainty, when we are dealing with unpredictabilities. So we have to, as as individuals, as leaders in organizations, we have to let go of this idea that somehow through control and predicting mechanisms, we will be able to manage crisis, we'll be able to manage predictability. Yes, the aggressive authoritarian styles are useful when we are dealing with known crisis. There are templates and we can follow those. For example, if there is a product recall, right? Your product is faulty, you want to recall that product. That case, yes, very quick decision making. There's a template we are going to follow and we overcome that. So there is a script that you can follow. But when dealing with crisis such as the pandemic, there is no script. And therefore, we have to turn towards, reconceptualizing what we mean, what kind of leadership is going to be useful here. And this is also because the problems that we are facing are constantly changing. Every day the problem is evolving. Therefore, the template approach, the autocratic control style wouldn't work. So what we need is, in fact, a small group of executives, who are going to work together, who can, we're going to establish a network of these executives together. And these groups are going to be made up of empowered individuals who are going to be driven by a culture of accountability and trust, which leaders in organizations will have to set up. And these networks, these groups are the ones who are going to come up with very rapid and creative solutions when we are dealing with uncertainty. So these, so instead of the command and control, we have to replace it with empathy and caring relationships. That's going to be crucial as we try to navigate unpredictability and uncertainty. And these themes that I'm talking about, they are very prominent in the area of resilient leadership. And resilient leadership has been identified to be sort of the weapon of choice when we are dealing with chaos, when we are dealing with complexity. And so now I would request Dina to pitch in, given that she's the leadership expert here. So over to you, Dina.
Thank you, Kirti. And very good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for being here despite your Sunday morning commitments. So when it comes to resilient leadership, the focus primarily shifts on the concept that to what extent the notion of resilience is embedded in the dynamics of leadership. And since Professor Kirti has started the discussion with introduction of two friends internationally, I will bring the example a little bit at home, and I will cite another example, but I will not show any picture because I am a big believer of storytelling and I will tell a story. So I was talking about resilient leadership, and I was talking about resilient leadership is primarily about the extent to which the leaders connect with the importance of resilience. So once upon a time, there was this little boy, and at a very young age, his mother died, so he lost his mother, and he missed his mother terribly. Then he realized that he found solace in something, and that something was nature. The connection between him and nature was not only instant, but it was magical. He found the same comfort and love in nature that he found with his mother. And he also realized that he hated school. Well, one of the reasons why I loved him so much. And the traditional academic curriculum was not for him. So much so that he stopped going to school. And guess what happened? His family members became very worried. And however, very early on, this little boy started expressing himself through art and poetry. Gradually, people realized that it was not only a mere inclination or a talent, it was rather a gift. Eventually, this gifted boy became a world-famous poet and a Nobel laureate in literature. So indeed, you all have guessed it. Again, there is no prize for that. I am talking about Rabindranath Tagore. So are we still wondering about his inspiration? Well, it was nature. He was not only a great writer or a poet or a novelist or a musician, he was also an exemplary leader and visionary. In 1921, he founded the world-renowned university, Vishwabharati University at Shantiniketan in West Bengal. It is an institution that not only nurtured world-famous personalities like Satyajit Ray or Indira Gandhi or Amartya Sen, but it also stands for its values and principles that are rooted in the acknowledgement and appreciation of nature. Rabindranath believed that no greatness can be accomplished by ignoring the importance of nature. And if we refer to the classic definitions of resilience, which Professor Kirti just shared, and the definitions of resilience that is followed nowadays, both in organizational, inside and outside organizational context, this is exactly what it is. So what I'm trying to say is that resilience and sustainability are not mutually exclusive concepts. Rather, they are very, very overlapping in nature. And this concept of resilience has an uncanny similarity to gender, especially the socialization aspect of gender. When we are talking about resilience, we are also talking about care and empathy and compassion, which are primarily the characteristics that describe femininity. Now, the beauty of it is one does not have to be a woman to be a resilient leader. Clearly, Rabindranath was not a woman, but to have that connection, one needs to think about the feminine facets like care, kindness, and benevolence, as opposed to the elements of masculinity, which are have been unfortunately recognized as also the characteristics of good managers, like aggression and domination. So, so when we are talking about challenging situations like unpredictability, and now we are living in that classic example of pandemic, we also need an equally flexible kind of a leadership to combat that. And this is where the importance, I think, the importance of resilient leadership comes in. All right, over to you, Pulkit.
Okay.
So thank you, Prof. Kirti and Prof. Dina for your views. So what I can understand as a nutshell, there cannot be a template for navigating through the difficulties. For a rapid solution and implementation of the same, a leader needs to set up the priority and needs to empower others in order to accomplish those priorities. A resilient response doesn't not limited to the IQ, and it also needs an EQ like empathy and compassion, as Prof. Dina mentions, and towards the people or employees, right? It is not a man or woman which differentiates as a perspective, but what matters over here is the feminine aspect of it. So thanks for the views. Now coming towards the deeper aspect and making the deep dive in our discussion. So just we want to understand, what does the word resilience mean? And we are quite often we are hearing about this word a lot these days. So Prof. Kirti, can you help us on this?
Absolutely right, Pulkit. So yes, I think over the last few months, especially, we've been hearing the word resilient a lot. We need to be resilient individually. Supply chains need to be resilient. So, you know, what I think might be an interesting thing to do is, why not get our audience to answer this? What do they think is resilience, right? So if you could all, we have the chat box activated. If you could just type in one word, okay, what resilience means to you, because I am absolutely sure we have heard of the term before, right? So one word, what does resilience mean to you? And if we could put this in the chat box, right? So adaptability. Could we have more attendees? If you could just type in the chat box, one word. Or let us know if the chat box is not accessible. Coping capacity, flexibility, you were not prepared to participate.
No.
No?
You caught them off guard.
Yeah, I caught them off guard. They were like, oh, I'm going to just sit and relax and listen to these people talk. But well, here you go. Oh, interesting. Ruthlessness, pragmatism, toughness, yeah, being tough. That allows you to, build that coping capacity. So if we could get a couple more answers. Okay, so what we have here is coping capacity, flexibility, pragmatism, ruthlessness, ability to bounce back, and toughness. Like I said, so we all understand what resilience is, right? So here's the thing, right? Thank you very much for participating. Made you work on a Sunday. The term resilience actually comes from the word resilier, which means to spring back, right? The ability to bounce back. Therefore, it is not surprising that when we often think of resilience, we think that yes, it is the capacity to bounce back, to rebound, getting back to how things were, maybe returning to an equilibrium or a stable state. In fact, physics, physical scientists were one of the first group of people who started using the term, and they used to use resilience to talk about resistance of a material to external shocks. So just to give you a bit of an idea, it's a very crude example, but it works. I have a rubber band here. You stretch it and you leave it, you find that it comes back to its original shape. That's resilience in a nutshell. That's the understanding. It will always return to its original form. You can try it with a spring as well, right? It bounces back to its original form. So when understood or when applied to an organization or an individual or a system, it is the ability to maintain a stability. When you are facing uncertainty, when you're facing shocks, the core purpose, integrity has to be maintained. Getting back to how things were. In the business context, we hear this quite often, returning to business as usual. So this understanding or this view of resilience, it emphasizes that we have to somehow, return to how things were, and we have to return to established benchmark. But here's my question to you all, right? Let's think about this. What if there is no going back? What if the way things were before was also not sustainable? What if there is not one equilibrium, but there are multiple equilibrium or stability states that we can go to? Chemistry, physics has already done work on that. So we don't have to revisit that more. What if the original way in which we were doing things is not desirable in the new normal? We keep hearing what is going to be a post-COVID world? What would be a new normal? So what if the way we were doing things is not sustainable anymore? And that's where I think there is lacking. There's something lacking in our current definition, this understanding of bouncing back. So resilience isn't just about returning back or to adapting. Because think about the rubber band, right? If I stretch it too much, it doesn't return to its original shape. In fact, if I keep stretching it too much, it might just snap and break. So what does that mean for an organization? That organizations eventually, when the external shock is too much, they will decline. I'm sure we don't want that for our organizations. We don't want that for us as individuals. So what we have to do is we have to understand that it's not just adaptability, but there is something else which is missing from this understanding of resilience. And this something missing, the missing piece here is the ability to transform. Yes, you adapt. Yes, you try and go to a stable position. But when that stable position is not sustainable, we have to transform. Reinvention is the key here, right? Because we have to be ready for the new normal. What does it mean for a business or an organization? It means changing your business model, changing the products and the services you are offering so that you are prepared for the new system, for the new environment. Now, climate change is actually a great example of this. Meaningful response to climate change necessitates that we have to move away. We have to transform from the business as usual, which is essentially a carbon intensive way of working, to a zero carbon way of working. So resilience in this case shouldn't be that I will continue to create emissions. That business as usual is not required. That's not sustainable. So the new conceptualization or the way we should be looking at resilience is adaptability as well as transformation. Because in unpredictability, in crisis, there is an opportunity. And also crisis is shaping the new world order. So if we are wanting to return to the way things were, we are going to not survive in the new world which is being created. I was just going through, one of the sectors which has been heavily impacted because of COVID is the hospitality sector. I recently read that, companies are having to lay off a number of their employees because of the economic implications. So I was looking at Airbnb, and what I found interesting was this idea of online or virtual experiences. So you can actually be sitting in India, sitting in Delhi, and learning how to make pasta in Italy. And over the last couple of months, that's the business unit which has been generating profit for Airbnb. So they are now having to think that as they prepare for a post-COVID world, what will be the significance of this particular business unit? So will we be able to go back to how things were, or should we embrace this kind of a new experience that we have been offering? So if I had to summarize, this is what I would say, that resilience encompasses both stability and transformation. Stability so that the vision, purpose remains intact, but transformation so that you are able to thrive in the new environment or the new normal, which is being shaped by the unpredictability and the crisis that we find ourselves in.
So thank you, Prof. Kirti. It was quite a good understanding about the resilience over here. So as we now understand about the resilience, so just we want to know where does the leadership fits in over here. So I believe Prof. Dina has worked on this area, and she is still working on this. So I think she can elaborate here and adds a lot value over here right now. So Prof. Dina.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. God, where do I start? Let's start with the responses of the guests that we have here. Like when we were talking about resilient, like the attendees, they came up with beautiful answers. Like you have come up with beautiful answers. Like say, for example, Pulkit talked about adaptation. Suman talked about coping capacity. Raj talked about flexibility, and Ganjyoti talked about pragmatism. So if these are the components that is defining resilience, maybe these are the components that are also required in resilient leadership. And as Kirti has very rightly pointed out, that it is a combination of stability and transformation. And when we are talking from an organizational perspective, we are also thinking about changing the business model and by keeping its vision and missions intact. So a lot of things are going on. It is really not a simple process. It is a cobweb of complexity. So in order to untangle that cobweb, the first thing that is required in the context of leadership, and now I am focusing primarily on leadership, is to understand yourself. So first we have to delve inside ourselves. So it starts with something that is called self-cognizance, or a better self-perception. So whereas this is primarily a very inherent micro internal kind of a skill, self-perception is key to the understanding of a resilient leadership from an organizational perspective. It's very simple. The better you understand yourself, the more efficient you are as a leader. This is because it is only through a holistic self-perception you can understand the importance of compassion, which is, again, as let me reiterate, one of the central principles of resilient leadership. So you realize that just like you have a worldview and perception of your own, similarly, so do other people. So when you are trying to develop this self-perception, magically, you are also developing something which is called empathy. And when we are talking about flexibility, when we are talking about pragmatism, when we are talking about adaptability, when we are talking about coping mechanism, we have to think about empathy. So it is like you learn to accept others through the process of self-acceptance. And this sense is the starting point of embracing diversity and effective teamwork. There are multiple ways leaders could hone on their self-perceptions. First, by reflecting on their past experiences, one can face and combat future challenges. So you know what you can do in a given context. It is a form of self-efficacy again. So when you know what you are supposed to do, when you know that, okay, these are the things that have happened in the past, and these are the things you want to work on in the present so that you can improve your future, it is kind of a form of self-efficacy. So the first thing by which you can develop a very solid self-perception is by working on self-efficacy. Second, by reflecting on what you stand for. In a way, we are also talking about identity here. Again, it's very simple. If leaders aspire to be great managers, that greatness specifically is situated beyond their excellent salaries and promising promotional opportunities. It is about how connected they feel with their organizations. Unless and until this sense of belongingness is established, the aspiration will make hardly any difference. So to put it simply, if leaders don't love their organizations, developing the characteristic features of resilience is going to be very, very, very challenging. Third, leaders must love their organizations and people, or else they cannot think substantively about the well-being of the people and ultimately the benefits of the organizations, and obviously ultimately the well-being of themselves. Leaders must think from about the images that they want to portray about themselves and the organizations to the outside world. In a way, it is also a kind of identity. But this concept of identity is more outwardly in nature. It is not about the micro identity. It is not about the individual identity. The more leaders are conscious about the reputation of their organizations, the more they feel, connected with their organizations and their people. And this brings us to the final way of developing self-perception, which is to understand what leaders represent, both as members and representatives of organizations. Here, leaders are required to be determined through displaying their greatest strengths and make sure that they are communicating them to the people. So here we are talking about the stability aspect of resilience. Unless and until leaders develop that quality of self-determinism, it is very, very difficult to maintain that stability aspect of leadership. And if one asks, then what is that one characteristic feature that contributes to the transformation aspect? Well, empathy. So through displaying their greatest strengths and make sure that they are communicating them to the people. The leaders encounter inside and outside their organizations challenges all the time, and that is how they can themselves be resilient, and they can guide their followers to be resilient, and they can create an organization which will become a role model of change in the face of unpredictability. So, but again, needless to say that when we are talking about the ways or the mechanisms to develop a resilient leadership, these ways and mechanisms are not mutually exclusive. They are very, very overlapping. So when we are talking about learning from past experiences, we are also talking about identity. When we are talking about identity, we are also talking about image. When we are talking about image, we are also talking about reputation. So they are very, very correlated to each other. So that pretty much in a nutshell what we mean by resilient leadership, especially in the context of unpredictability.
Okay, thanks, Faustina, on this side. So moving towards the next point, when you talk about the leadership and the resilience. So what could be the sum of the confusion when we talk about the resilient leadership? So again, when we talk about the resilient leadership, so Prof, I think whosoever, like Prof Dina or Prof Kiti, anyone of you can take the lead on this.
Well, since I am not a resilient person per se, let me take up this question, because this is something I am really, really interested in knowing, especially when I am working in the field of resilient leadership. So, and since we are focusing a lot on clearing the concepts, let me ask you, Pulkit, like since you are, you know, the next generation, and you are this young blood who is doing awfully well in his career, and you are working in an organizational context, you are dealing with people in and out, and at the same time yourself and the organization are facing this unpredictability of the pandemic. In that context, what are your opinion about resilience? Especially, what do you think about resilience being the buzzword?
So I would say as a buzzword, as a resilience. So it's something people ability to adapt, I would say. And when I say ability to adapt, people, how fast people can adapt to the situation and can quickly come out of the problems. So if they found struggling, if you take an example of the current situation of COVID-19, so a lot of businesses, a lot of corporates are falling under some issues, and how they can respond to the new norms, how can they challenge the status quo of the running the business model and come out to the different idea. So if they are able to make that shift and change, so yes, that's what resilience means over here, according to me.
Do you want to shed some light on the buzzword? Like what in particular, what I want to know, that are we really undermining the importance, like where is resilience is such an important concept nowadays when we are talking about stability and transformation, by making it a buzzword, are we really undermining its importance?
So this is, you know, it's my personal opinion. You know, buzzwords are useful. It's a useful heuristic device, I think. Gets people mobilized, right? Everybody, all, you know, your leaders, your CEOs, your managers, everybody's talking, let's be resilient, resilient. My only concern here is that when something becomes a buzzword, we might lose its real meaning. And as individuals, we stop questioning what it means. You know, we just, we keep on borrowing what it meant by someone, it dilutes the meaning, which is what I have observed is happening with this idea of resilience. We focus too much on the stability part, and we forget about the transformation bit. In trying to, you know, work, and, you know, we actively try to get back to how things were without consciously realizing that, listen, that was not sustainable, and that's why it's not working right now. So let go, you know. My friend Taylor Swift, a really popular friend, you know, she said that way back, shake it off. I think it's important. We end up focusing a lot on stability. And as a leader, I think this is even more problematic because then you miss opportunities. You know, you're trying to control things so much and bring them to a normal that was, you miss out on opportunities that are being created. So you actually end up reducing the transformational potential which is there in these unpredictabilities and uncertainties. So it's just a personal opinion. While I understand buzzwords help in mobilizing support and getting things done, when it comes to resilience, I think it's important that we remember that restoration and reorganization, they're going to work together. So if you end up focusing on just one, then it's a problem.
So thanks, Prof. Kirti. So if I want to relate to the corporate world in the same idea about, as you mentioned, the available opportunities and people miss out on that. I would like to add over here in terms of an example, like this is the normal TV broadcasting system, right? People tend to follow the business model like the other daily soaps. But very soon in the late few years, we saw that Netflix and Amazon Prime has taken the place, right? Coming to the a simpler one more example, the disruption made by the e-commerce companies, right? Earlier we have the normal brick and mortar system model, but when e-commerce comes, there's a lot of disruption happens. Only few of the companies are able to make out of it, like Reliance. They come up with an idea of they have opened their own e-commerce chain with the name of AGO and some others, and they are able to bounce back. But they are in the same place. There are few who are not able to they're not able to come up with the same level of strategy or the resilience. So great. Now coming to our different part. So how is it useful in navigating the unpredictability and uncertainties? We would like to understand on those parts over here.
So, Pulkit, who do you want to take a lead on this?
Yeah, I can talk about, like, you know, from a leadership perspective, there are a lot of confusions. Like when we are talking about sustainability and leadership or resilient leadership, there are a lot of confusions. And I think this is one of the confusion that is also feeding into that unpredictability. Primarily because accomplishing resilience is a complex problem for everyone involved in the system. And leaders are, hey, at the end of the day, they are human beings. So when we are talking about this relationship between the organizations and the leaders, the best way the leaders can make their lives easier is by understanding that organizations are the microcosms of the bigger and more complicated adaptive system. And by adaptive system, or the bigger scenario that I'm talking about here, it could be environment, it could be government, it could be the structural policies, rules and regulations. It could be labor laws, it could be anything. So leaders must understand that organizations are that part of that bigger microcosm, and organizations cannot survive outside that environment. These systems constitute a tangle of environmental, economic, social, and political structures within which organizations are positioned. In order to be operational in these adaptive systems, leaders should play an, I would say, an interpretive and communicative role. Therefore, the major dilemma that leadership faces in the context of resilience as an outcome is to balance sustainability very carefully on the scale of human morality and doing business. So where do I draw the line between profit making and taking care of the society? Now, for example, leaders need to have a clear concept of what is resilience. So they need to know what the concept is. Unless and until they know what the concept is, they will never know what they want out of it. And they also need to know that what are the determinants of resilience. So what are the factors that lead to resilience? What are the indicators of resilience? Very, very important. So you need to know, okay, this is what I am doing. This is what is getting manifested. So am I being resilient or not? Or my leadership is resilient or not? Or am I promoting sustainability or not? and what are the appropriate resilience-based approaches in the context of their given organizations, and that too within the larger settings of the environmental conditions and political governance that I just mentioned. Well, sadly, nowadays, many leaders either fail or are discouraged to explore and examine the full potential of their organizational leadership within the context of their businesses, wider environmental and socio-political systems. It requires a very, very, very labor-intensive process of trial and error learning, and thereby a very sound knowledge that would not only benefit the organizations in a given time, but would also facilitate future leadership approaches. Now, the central idea of this trial and error learning is something that we call in the leadership literature candor. The first step of which is the traditional method of problem solving and delegation. So here is a problem. You set up a meeting, you do a decision, and you provide a solution, and you delegate the solution. Maybe that problem solving in the context of that problem in that given situation is right on. And that is very, very appropriate, and that is very, very effective. But then it goes beyond that. It requires leaders to be constantly vigilant and monitoring the problem. So a constant monitoring of the solution with respect to time and context, and that too by taking into consideration the interests and opinions of the people, constitutes the essence of character. So all right, you have these team members, you bring them together, you make a decision, and you delegate the solution. But resilient leadership or solving this confusion does not end there. It requires doing the same thing over and over and over again, and that too at regular intervals. So this not only, it sounds tedious, but it is very effective. It not only enables an organization to take time, appropriate and resilient, appropriate actions, but it also improves the triad. Like in the field of sustainability and leadership, we use these triad, the PPPs, people, profit, planet, all the time. It improves that people, profit, and planet relationship significantly. So it is going to be a win-win situation for the leadership, for the organization, and the stakeholders.
Thank you. So I request Prof. Kirti to add on this, how this is useful in navigating through uncertainties.
Absolutely. So I think, I'd like to build upon this idea of candor that, Dina has discussed. How that is going to be, a tool for leaders as they try to navigate through crisis, unpredictabilities, and uncertainties. I think, if I could just talk about some behaviors, and I see that, most of the people who have joined us are fellow, people, students of IIMU alumni. So when I'm discussing this, when I was thinking about resilience and I was thinking about resilience in organizations, I was thinking, where have I read about resilient leaders? Where have I read about resilient organizations? And, Jim Collins' work immediately came to my head, Level 5 Leadership, and his talk, his book on Good to Great. Because he had looked at these organizations who had been successful for a very, very long period of time. So, and then as I was understanding resilient leadership, while he doesn't specifically use the term resilient leadership, he doesn't use the term candor, he's actually talking about the same thing. So I'm trying to, so when I'm discussing these behaviors, I'm bringing both what he has talked about in terms of good to great organizations, as well as what we know from resilient leadership and what Dina has just talked to us about resilient leadership. I think how it helps us is resilient leadership or resilient leaders. The adaptability comes from the idea that you're able to balance your head and heart. It is really important to make the tough decisions. And we are seeing that right now. Leaders are having to lay off their employees. They're having to, let go of their business plans in which they must have invested a lot of time and energy. Because the fact that, you have to accept the brutal facts which are out there. So the head has to be there, right? We have to think about the financial liquidity of our organization. But at the same time, resilient leaders are going to do this while being extremely empathetic. working compassionately with the employees. We have an example, right? Actually, we have a couple of examples. I would encourage everyone, if you're not already doing this, just read the emails that Google CEO has been sending to his employees. He does the TGIF emails. And you can sense from those emails the tone, the compassion that he has for everyone, the understanding he has for employees who are going through a lot of stress because of work from home conditions. But at the same time, it's also taking that, yes, there are, we have to confront the brutal fact, like I said, Collins talks about this in terms of a Stockdale paradox. And as Dina mentioned, candor is very important. Be honest, be truthful about what the position is, use those facts. They are difficult. And if you're looking for someone who was, who was rather popular for this particular trait, Jack Welch at GE, he was, he was so popular for being extremely using the idea of brutal candor. So, calling a spade, but doing that with compassion, being very empathetic. Since we're talking about resilience, and I've already talked about, the stability is important as well. And the stability comes from the vision, the values, and the mission of the organization. So when you are forcing unpredictability, go back to the core vision. Why is it that we are here? Not only does it help you to prioritize, right? When there are too many opportunities, too many threats, going back to the vision, it creates the discipline to prioritize. It also helps people come together, looking at the bigger purpose, looking at the bigger picture, why we are really here. I think decision making is going to be extremely important when we are talking about dealing with unpredictability. We have to we have to again let go of this idea that we can get access to complete information which is out there. There is nothing like perfect information, and let me be very honest, we are never going to get all the information that's out there. Quick decision making over elegant decision making. Do not resilient leaders are not going to look for the perfect solution. Good is okay, because we are continuously experimenting. Information is changing every single day. So you don't want to be left behind. It is very important that we understand that, make our peace with the idea that decision making will happen with imperfect information. Knowing that speed is what we need when we are dealing with unpredictability. One of the other things, and this is something that people who work in crisis management, they have talked about it a lot, and I think it's very useful for resilient leaders as well. Communication. Using that narrative, how you're going to craft that narrative. If we look at most of the global leaders, as soon as the WHO said this is a pandemic, most of them had video messages. Most of them came on the screens, they had a message crafted about how we are going to get things done. And some were more optimistic than others. Some were not clear. Some people were hiding things. And the leaders that we are celebrating right now are the ones who had a very clear, concise message, which, had empathy, but at the same time, the brutal facts that, hey, everyone, we will be imposing a lockdown, but we also know that it's going to be tough. And we are here in this with you. Over the last few months, I've seen a lot of global leaders using Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and they're showing how they're working in their homes. I think this is all a strategy to let everybody know that, we are with you, we are going through the same challenges, and we also accept that it's not that easy. So we understand, so that empathy is there in the communication. Clarity of communication, I think, is extremely important when we are dealing both with internal as well as external stakeholders, and resilient leaders are absolutely great at this. Go with the facts, keep everybody aware. When there is already a lot of uncertainty, we don't want to add on to that uncertainty by creating a lot of confusion about our messaging. So be very clear, very concise and empathetic in your communication. And, I go back to when I think about communication, as I said, as a self-proclaimed Potterhead, Professor Dumbledore had, said this: words are our most inexhaustible source of magic. And resilient leaders understand this, they practice this. Words are so important. To give you an example, I started with Jacinda Ardern. From the day that New Zealand went into lockdown, she created the narrative around it is us versus Corona. The entire population of New Zealand is going to win this war against Corona. And she mobilized that support. And that's how it has been. It's not her as the Prime Minister responding to this crisis, but it's the entire, everybody, every New Zealander feels that we are in this together, this is a war and we are fighting together. So that's the strength that words have. And finally, it is, something that we all understand that when we are facing with crisis, it's very easy to start thinking short term, but resilient leaders will always stay focused on the longer term. So they're constantly thinking, right? While we are looking at stability, what are the new opportunities? How is the new normal going to look like? And can we shape it, right? We are not going to be passive receivers. Can we actually shape that new normal? And this is where that transformation potential of resilience comes into picture.
Okay. So thank you, Prof. Kirti, on this part. Now, since for the brevity of the time, I would want our viewers to ask if they have some questions around it. So we would like to answer, and we just can wait for a few seconds if they have some questions. So guys, you can type your questions on the QA box over here.
It can be a question, it can be a comment. Maybe, we spoke about something that resonated with you.
Since because the resilience leadership is quite a very buzz thing around, we can be dragged away and we can discuss about it in hours and hours. So we have a lot of things to discuss about. But since I just want to give a chance to our viewers as well to ask and participate. Okay, I think the Sunday morning is quite hectic for them.
People have not had their morning tea or coffee.
You should hang out with me more.
So, okay, then in that case, continuing with our discussion, just want to understand the different aspect of the resilient leadership over here. So, I would like to, I want you, both of you, the prof, to shed more light on the how do individuals' behavior and actions create systematic social change? So, can you shed some light on this aspect? How the resilient leaders can do this, and how the individual can contribute on this part as a systemic and social change. So, Prof. Dina, because I think you are on leadership front, you have quite a long experience on that. So, would you like to add on this part?
Sure. When we are talking about social change, it is always about delegating. As I said, that there is the only unique thing about leadership in the organizational context is problem solving. So when we are talking about change, we are talking about delegating. So delegating is always the one of the important, if not the most important responsibilities of a leader. However, when we are talking about effective delegation, that could sometimes be problematic. This is because it is just not about the division of labor. Like when we teach structure, we start with the division of labor. See, this is the like the storehouse of all the problems. It may not be that. It is also making sure that the coordination mechanism and the systems of accountability are in place. The traditional leadership functions like enhancing teamwork, providing ownership and therefore autonomy, and administering the appropriate decision-making processes are also the elements of resilient leadership. So resilient leadership is not something that is out there that we have to achieve. Resilient leadership is already in there. But what brings that systematic change is, or what makes resilient leadership different from the traditional leadership is the concept of, as I said, self-perceptions. So we have to start from within. We have to believe in what we are doing. So it is about believing in, not only believing in oneself, but when we are conceptualizing that change, we are bringing that change in ourselves first. So as I mentioned before, that the foundation of resilient leadership is self-cognizance or self-perception. When we talk about self-perception, we are also talking about knowing oneself. And when we are talking about knowing oneself, we are also talking about realizing what one wants. This entire process also enables leaders to realize that what is the right thing to do and what is not the right thing to do. Thus, positive social change starts with the leaders themselves. So if I am talking about, indeed, resilient leadership is balancing stability and transformation. And when I'm talking about transformation, especially in the context of resilience, I am talking about long-term transformation. And that long-term transformation can never, ever be accomplished unless and until the change takes place at the micro level with regards to leadership. I was talking about that positive social change. Now, if we position this concept philosophically, we will find that leadership could be practiced at a very micro level, where leaders could be leaders without the presence of any follower. So when I decide that I am starting this change, like it's very simple, you all have done that. The moment you realize that you want to better your future and therefore you want to pursue higher education, or you want to come to IIMU for your MBA or PhD, and then you want to move on, that is a positive social change, which is improving the life of maybe at least one individual, but that is change. So leadership can be practiced if we define leadership from the concept of social change. If we perceive leadership from the concept of social change, that is also leadership, but without any follower. So if we want to start, if we want to do anything systematically, we have to start at the micro level. And that micro level includes the person. So that is what like resilient leadership primarily stands for when we are talking about systemic social change, where the leaders are required to create that agency first within themselves and then within others. Then obviously then we are talking about followers, and then obviously the team members, and then, but again, like, you know, if we go back to that analogy of aeroplanes, like unless and until you secure your oxygen mask first, you really are not in a position to help others. Similarly, when we are talking about a systemic change, when we are talking about a long-term transformation, that transformation has to happen in the very first place at a very, very micro level, which is the level of leadership. And that is how resilient leadership could make a difference. And that is how resilient leadership is different from the traditional concept of leadership. I'm done.
Right. So if I could just, add a little bit to it, what Dina's talked about. Dina, you ended up on this idea, the reconceptualization of what we think about leadership. So these two images in front of us. One is that of a banyan tree. Most of us would probably recognize it. Very stoic, really, really strong trunk. And especially in the subcontinent, we think of our leaders to be like banyan trees, very strong, very stoic, all encompassing, so powerful. But here's the thing about a banyan tree. With stoicism also comes the inflexibility, and it's also a very resource intensive tree, to be honest. On the other side, the other picture is that of, it's a weed plant, it's a dandelion. It's actually one of those weeds which help other plants grow. So it's a beneficial weed. So you want this weed. It's a very flexible plant, grows almost everywhere, supports others, and doesn't really need a lot of support or care. You don't really have to take care of it, and it will grow on its own. So I think that this is, we're talking about how we're thinking about leadership and what is resilient leadership. And I think that the image of the dandelion is something which speaks to our idea of resilient leadership, letting other people grow and having that flexibility that nurturing thing, it's a weed that helps other plants grow. So that nurturing idea, what Tina was talking about, empathy and compassion, is what resilient leadership is going to be. And very importantly, the flexibility, which we don't see in our initial, our old conceptualizations of leadership, which are very similar to that of how we look at a banyan tree. So maybe that's where we need to change our image of leaders, not the banyan, but we need leaders who are going to be more like the dandelion flowers. So that's my 2 cents, Pulkit.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Dina, and thank you, Prof. Kirti. It was quite an insightful discussion. So just to, as a conclude and summarizing, we understood what does resilience mean, and how does the leadership fits in, and what are the different aspects of it, and how does the recent corporate settings is also taking into place. As well as also we discussed about how does the resilient leadership should be and the different characteristics of a resilient leader and the different examples, and with the brevity of time we also able to cover how does the gender takes a role here, and how does the different perspective take place. So thank you Prof. Dina and Prof. Kirti, and as well as all the attendees for being part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Pulkit. Thanks, Dina.
Thank you, Kirti. Thank you, Pulkit.
Thank you.
Special thanks to Ruchi for organizing this entire event.
Yes.
How can we forget her?
Thanks, Ruchi.
Thank you, Ruchi. Yeah.
Thank you.